Hello there, my name is Dan and welcome to my video. Last time we went over building and painting the studio and today we carry on with that journey. When it comes to electricity, a lot of checks need to be made. Basic electric circuits can be easy to understand, but they still can be extremely dangerous. So first I use a mains detector to make sure power is off in the main board, and then swap to a multimeter to measure the voltage in case there was something wrong with the mains detector, and to find which cable belongs where. To help find each cable, I take the isolation of each tip and start touching ends till I hear the beep. That tells me I have both ends of the same cable. Once I know I have all ends correctly identified and there are no accidentally damaged wires, I can start putting plugs in. This step is very easy. There are 3 holes, one for each cable type. Just put the wires in the right place and put a socket on the wall. We made sure the pair of sockets was aligned and placed the shield to guarantee everything was as it should. Measure all ends once more to be certain all wires are where they need to be and not crossing, and finish with the front panel of the plug. After that, I just repeated this process to all the plugs. Lights are not very different than plugs. First steps are the same. Measure for electrical power, take off isolation, find and identify ends of wires, put a switch on the shield, and move on. In the case of light switches, it's good to test that the buttons can flip without obstructions too. Since this was some big LED panels to put on drywall ceiling, the screws that came with the panels were not good enough. So I had to test some different screws to make sure it stayed up. After I made the first hole, I tried to use a cardboard box to put all 4 screws in the right places, while keeping the wires in the middle. Once all were marked, it was time to commit and make the other 3 holes, and with the help of my partner connect the wires with some fast connections and put the panel in the screws. And at the end of doing this process to both panels, all that was left was to test the lights. The next step on the build was to make the window look a bit better. So I took all the measurements of the window, got some L-shaped bars on a local hardware shop and started cutting. Once I had all 4 sides made, I tested all of them to make sure they fit perfectly. I left the ends bigger on purpose so I could then trim them down to make a nicer edge. I marked, cut and tested again. Once I was sure that all fitted perfectly, I used some liquid silicone glue to fix everything in place and the window was finished. We are getting close to the moving in step, but first we need to identify where to put the table. Most of the information I've found tells me that the speakers need to be put projecting to the furthest wall possible, and the ideal listening place would be at about 38% of the room. I measured the room to have an accurate measure and tried to best identify the spot. This is the dimensions of the room I made after including inside walls and flooring. The ideal listening spot for me would be around 1.93 meters from the back wall and 2.20 meters from the side walls. So with that information in mind, I built the table and placed it on the spot. As for the boxes, leave it for the pros to deal with them. An empty room is bound to be super echoey, but there are a few things that can be done to reduce it. Like for example, covering any 90-degree corners, find and isolate your monitor points of reflection and pad the wall directly behind you where the main feedback will be reflected to you. The goal is not necessarily to keep all audio in, so covering your walls from top to bottom will only waste your money. Sound isolation from exterior should be done inside the actual wall. Our goal is merely to diffuse the audio to improve our response and reduce echo. For this, we will be reusing a bunch of wall foam donated by a neighbor and some very cheap corner base straps from Amazon. They send this vacuum packed, but don't worry, as soon as air gets in the package, they get back to their original size and shape. I ordered just enough to cover 2 corners on the back wall. Since the only point for them is to diffuse the low frequencies that normally build up in the corners that are furthest away from the monitor position, I stacked them one up and the next upside down. You want to avoid having all of the ridges facing the same direction to maximize the wave diffusion and avoid accidental frequency buildups. To fixate the foam to the walls, I went with some heavy-duty liquid nail with fast drying. I probably didn't need heavy duty, but I really wanted to avoid having foam pieces falling over, especially in the ceiling. And since I am the owner, no one can complain if I ruin the walls but me. Applied it with the normal close to the edges and across the middle since they are very small and light pieces. Tested it once to make sure the pieces fit and then glued all of them, always making sure the glue would hold the pieces long enough for it to dry and hold. Once the back corners were sorted, I decided it was time to do the ceiling, and that was another set of problems. First, the pieces were way too big and gravity was against me. And second, the liquid nail was not drying fast enough and I couldn't physically hold the pieces for long enough. So I had to improvise getting some Gorilla double-sided tape and cut the foam in half. I used a microfiber cloth to clean every piece before applying the tape to prevent any residues from being under it. Made a whole frame out of the tape and then added liquid nail to it, and it worked. The tape would do the heavy lifting for me, keeping the foam up for the liquid nail to solidify. With smaller pieces, I was also able to alter patterns to increase diffusion. I focused on the places directly above the monitor positions and middle sections of the room. Now that the ceiling was done, it was time to sort out the back wall. This wall will be directly behind my back and as such will be the second most important point of reflection. I could invest a bit more and get a proper wood diffusion panel, but that would cost a lot. The next best thing is books of different shapes and sizes, and luckily for me, I have a weird addiction of collecting fantasy books. So, I got 2 small bookshelves from IKEA to organize them as decorative wave diffusers. And on the middle of them I tried putting some extra foam to use as much of the panels I still had, and save some money on a third bookshelf and some books to fill it. Even though my floor is isolated with some acoustic isolation and heavy grade wood laminate, it will still reflect waves. A good practice is to have a thick carpet under the main listening triangle for some wave absorption, so I invested on a rug big enough to have me, my desk and both monitor speakers for that effect. Lastly, I got to set up my electric drum kit after being in a small paper box for 7 years, and due to the grip spikes plus the vibrations of the drum kit itself, I set up another old rug I had under it until I can invest in a better one. And finally here we are, using the space I will now call a studio. I am sure I made some mistakes during my DIY project since I'm not a builder or a sound engineer. Don't take this as the only way to do it. If you're going to do something similar, make your own research and adapt to your needs and possibilities. Let me know in the comments below how do you think it turned out. Would you have done anything differently? Like and subscribe if you liked the video, and until next time, safe travels.